Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to get stock sentiment from news headlines. I have previously covered this topic and using the headlines for backtesting in this video here. But what I want to do in the script is to gather the news headlines and hopefully combine them with our technical scores or technical ranks and see if it's a good idea to develop a trading strategy when combining both. And also within this script, I'm going to be defining the words to use and classifying them as either good or bad versus just using the generic lexicon. So we're going to start off by requiring all of these packages here. Now, in order to get this to run, you do need some sort of source for headlines or anything that's in text form and descriptive that we can extract the sentiment from. As I covered in the previous tutorial, we're going to be using headlines that I scraped from Finviz for multiple stocks. And to give you an example of what that looks like, we're going to take a look at news. So we have the timestamp, we have the news headline, and the ticker. I believe I do have a tutorial on how to scrape this data. And what that script is doing is just going to Finviz, going to a particular stock and searching for the news headlines down at the bottom. That's going to scrape all of this data. It displays a maximum of 100 headlines at a time. So that's the data that we're going to be using. Now from using this file, I'm going to be extracting the news headlines in the next block in our code. So the first thing we need is to subset our news file to the particular stock we need. So for that given week, we can click on Sent News. And so we have Cisco. As I mentioned, we only get 100 entries. So by using all the data, let's see what type of sentiment we get for that given week. We're going to start off by converting our character vector between encodings in line 24, and then we're going to pass that text into this next function called getNRCSentiment. Now it's going to use its own lexicon by default, and if we take a look at what it returns from our text, we can click on this data frame. So we have a few range of emotions, again using its own lexicon. So we have anger, anticipation, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, surprise, trust, and we also have a negative and positive sentiment score. So it looks like for that given week, we didn't see any negative and only positive scores, and each row is supposed to represent a different headline. So to get an overall score, we can sum each column, which is represented in this bar plot here. So it looks like for this particular stock, we had more positive sentiment than negative by using the default lexicon. Now in the next block, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the data, and what I'm going to be doing is instead of getting the overall score for the given week, I'm going to try and get a score each day that's available in our data set. To clean up the data, we're going to start off by removing any blank rows that display loading. Now to remove the sources so that doesn't conflict with the actual sentiment, we're going to strip the headlines by locating the position of where the return and new line appear, and then we're going to subset each of the rows in our headlines between the first character and the end of the headline. Since my date column does return timestamps, I just want to return the date, so we're going to go ahead and remove the time from each timestamp. After that's done, we can go ahead and extract the unique dates, which will get passed into this lapply, and for each of the dates we're going to extract the sentiment. We're going to return that as a data frame, and I'm also going to add the net score, which is just the positive sentiment minus the negative. We're going to add the stock and date as columns and return that as a data frame. So the output will display something similar as the block above, but this will just be a summary for each of the dates. So here we see all of our emotions, the negative and positives, the net score, the symbol, and then the date. Now following a similar approach, I'm going to show you how to use your own lexicon. First, we need to convert all the words in our text into lowercase, and in line 78, I'm going to read in my custom lexicon. Now this turned out to be easier to do in Excel, which I ended up saving as a CSV file. So if you would like to define your own lexicon, what you need to do is you need to have two columns, one for word and then the other for sentiment. Now in the first column, you need to list words and give them an emotion and classify their sentiment as positive or negative. As you see, many of these appear to be duplicate, and to save time, I just classified between joy and fear for the actual emotion, and of course positive or negative. But according to the documentation, you don't need to necessarily list the word twice. So long as you have a positive or negative for each of the words, I think this will work. We're going to read the table in line 78. And similar to the line above, we're going to pass in each date, but this time we're going to define our lexicon in line 87. We're only going to keep the fear, joy, negative, and positive columns. We're going to sum each, calculate our net score, and then add the symbol and date. So we take a look at our new sentiment scores using our own lexicon. We can kind of narrow down on good or bad sentiment using the keywords listed in my CSV file. Now to simplify the project, I will need a function which is in our next block that just passes in a symbol and and extracts the sentiment score each day. So what I did was just copy the lines I used in the blocks above to return a similar data frame as the one I showed you for the stock that we pass in, so long as that symbol is within our news data frame. We're going to go ahead and use that function in the next block to get the sentiment for a different symbol, and we're also going to plot the stock price against it. So in line 155, you would need to define a new symbol. We're going to use that function in the previous block to get the sentiment. We're going to convert that as an XTS object, and since the actual net score varies a lot, I'm just going to use a running sum looking back 9 days, and the running sum is what we're going to be using as a technical indicator. We're now going to get the stock data. We're going to merge it with our sentiment, plot the candlesticks along with the technical indicator, and now for the plot we see the stock price from October 28 to November 8, and here at the bottom we see the running sum over the last 9 days for our sentiment score. So what I'm thinking about doing is, if I want to combine this with our tech scores, is to auto rank each stock, and by doing so we would be able to tell whether the news headlines are good or bad for each given day. But if I'm able to come up with a better plan, I'll show you that as well. Well, this concludes the video, guys. I hope this was useful information. I'll leave a link down in the description area to my Patreon where you can find this script along with all relevant files that are within this R markdown. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.